Welcome to Tiny Hands, Big Dreams here on the homestead. They say that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, that's what I had been doing. I had been trying to garden in the same way over and over again, and it still wasn't working. So finally it dawned on me that I probably should do something different. Now, I was trying to do this in the way that I see most people do it, that most people seem to have success with. Fence a space, make garden beds, grow food, and be happy. Well, here in the jungle, it doesn't work like that, apparently. Not for us. The insects are entirely too voracious for that, and they would prefer whatever we plant instead of the copious amount of weeds that grow in. As you can see, this does not look like a garden. It was once a garden. It was supposed to be a garden with nice garden beds dug. Instead, I have put the goats in there. So that tells you how well that went. Now I am salvaging a trellis here, but other than that, I sort of needed to start over. Now, out of frustration, I sort of threw up my hands one day, and I think it was Chris who came up with the idea that perhaps we should try something completely different. He would come up with that idea, so I'm grateful for him in thinking outside the box like that. So instead, we are going to be fencing each bed and taking down the perimeter fence of the garden, which hopefully will allow our chickens and ducks to do their dang job and eat the bugs, instead of just kind of eat corn and wander around. So we're going to put them to use. Now, this was the beginning of the project. I had only hope, no actual total plan yet. I just knew I needed to sort of demolish and start over. So there's a lot of start and stop, change my mind kind of things. But I wanted to take you along for the process because I think it's important to show things not working always perfectly, things having to be changed, and so you can see that process. You can see the total mess I was working with. I'll show you just how bad it was in a minute, and then you can see the end result. So, all right, let's go. Here we are. Yes, that is our house, our tent house. It is also a mess, and the absolute overgrown disaster mess of what was once a garden. Okay, so this started with, I need to remove all of the grass that had actually grown behind the chayote trellis, which are, if you can see there, there's twine that goes up to our second story, which actually worked great for the chayote to climb up, but I had left a strip of grass behind that, stupidly, not considering how much that would grow. So I had to seriously dig this out and completely redo it. So that was quite a bit of a workout, but man, was it worth it. Now, one of the most important things whenever I'm doing a project is thinking about how I can use everything. So in this instance, yes, there's a chainsaw in the background of this voiceover. That is part of life. We're always working here. So in the video, though, we are actually gathering up all of these weeds that I've pulled out, and Eli is stuffing them into a bag and taking them up to the pigs. I don't like having anything go to waste, and the pigs really, really enjoy the treat. The goats are still here, and I occasionally throw some stuff to them, but they don't love the stuff that's been pulled out as much as the pigs do, so it's perfect for them. The bed by the house took on a massive life of its own. As you can see here, we've gone a little off here. This is no longer a garden project. This is now a house project. The holes in the house were really starting to become a problem. Not only was the sort of plastic fabric that we used for the house, a year and a half ago, dissolving and yes, leaving microplastics everywhere, which we're really, really not a fan of, but it was also starting to let all the bugs in because there's giant gaping holes. So we got black plastic for a new wall, took down the old curtains, and as we took them down, realized that they were literally dissolving. So that became a second part of this particular project. Things snowball around here quite aggressively sometimes. Luckily, I have someone who will ride the snowball with me. Our curtains are not fancy. They are made of the same sort of plastic fabric, sort of construction fabric that is used a lot around here. No, not fancy, but they work for us, and they are mostly waterproof, and they keep the sun out. So it's important that we have them. And it's sort of mesmerizing to watch this, honestly. Speaking of snowballing, this is not the garden, but it is sort of part of our front area path, the most used path, and thus I decided to seriously change it. So there we go. We were putting some steps in and really trying to make it a lot better, so it's no longer muddy and it'll be nice and graveled, because we use it a million times a day. And those are the kind of areas I like to make sure are really usable. Our gravel lives in the driveway, which means off I go to the driveway, up and down the stairs 1 million times. speaking of snowballing, I realized that a lot of the bugs that we get in the house, around the house, on the house, are because of this grass and weeds that sits around it. So in this little section, at least, I decided to pull all those out. Flamethrower for making a path here is just a really good way to get this done quickly, kill the weeds without actually removing the roots, so nothing washes away. It's kind of our preferred method. In this case, I was just trying to make a path in front of this bed. It's where I started. You will see the snowball effect quite soon. This is where I changed my mind and decide to burn the whole world down. It was kind of fun. Now, here we go. I've jumped ahead in time. I have already, as you can see behind me, set up one bed. Now that I know that I can do it, I'll show you. I wasn't going to show you the first one. So, there's my lovely husband, bringing me materials. Sure do like him. I am setting up just a quick perimeter with string so I know what I'm doing and I don't get all wonky as I'm digging. I'm not great at the straight lines unless I have a little bit of a guide, so I give myself a guide, and off we go. I will say the one thing that I decided to do here that I typically, historically, refuse to do is that I am not actually removing the roots of all of these plants, because if I did, I would be removing so much soil and just general mass with it that I would end up with sunken beds, which was the exact opposite of what I wanted. I actually wanted to add as much as possible to raise them up a bit, so I decided to basically turn everything over and chop it and hope for the best that I don't have a lot of things growing back, knowing that I can pull the weeds out later. And I think in this instance, it was definitely the right decision. And we're amending. Shavings and sand loosen up the soil a good bit. We have very high clay soil, so this helps just kind of loosen it up and give some aeration to it. And then I mix that in, and that's a good base. It's not perfect, but it's a good base for amending the soil. We're working with heavy clay here, so it is a lot of work to try to amend it into something that is capable of growing good food. There is nothing that the chickens like more than freshly turned earth. I fought them so much in this process. They ate all my worms. But they probably also ate a bunch of other stuff I don't want, which was the whole point. They just ended up scratching it all out of the bed, which just drove me crazy. So I just wanted to give it a quick flatten before I put the actual netting on. Let's talk a little bit about our plan here. Now, I'm putting in right now little rebar stakes that were lovingly cut, sanded, cleaned, painted. Turns out we don't need to do that, but it worked really well in this instance. We've just learned a little bit since then. This is Mangara, which is just a water pipe that was cut to length and sits perfectly over those rebar stakes. I actually can just shove the Mangara straight in the ground, skip the rebar altogether, saves on cost, saves on a good bit of labor, and works just as well. And then I tie them all together on the top with some twine, which will actually help hold the bird netting and kind of keep them from flopping side to side. Back in the driveway, measuring out my bird netting. Super specific measuring here, works well. Use the feet you've got. Just know that your feet aren't real feet in my case. They are some approximation of something like 10 inches. But you know what? If you know what that is, you can use it, and it's kind of awesome. All right, this is my least favorite part of this entire process, is putting up the bird netting, because it catches on everything. I hate this stuff, but we had it, and it worked well in this instance, so I will put up with the annoyance. It all gets staked down with homemade stakes made mostly by the 10-year-old child. He liked that project. Just cut pieces of relatively thick gauge wire and bent them into sort of a staple shape, if you will, and pushes into the ground, holds that bird netting down. Turns out I need to use less than I thought, because the birds just don't try to get under it, but we've got lots now in case they do start pushing the edges of that when there's something interesting in there. And there we go. Bed number 2 is done. Okay, so you've seen the process, and now I want to show you the finished result. Now, because we're homesteading, nothing's ever really complete. If you homestead, you know it's always a work in progress, but this is where we're at now, and things are going really well. We're really enjoying the bit of an update. So let's check it out. Here's that front path, all nice and neat. Now, a lot of it's well packed. Some of it still needs a little bit of, oh, hello, chicken, a little bit of time to settle, but it's working really nice. There's no more mud. Everything drains pretty well. Even last night we had heavy, heavy rain, and it still drained pretty good, and the chicken seems pleased, so there's always that. Now, little updates, little things. I think it's always the little things that can make a project really nice. Not having this grass here made a big difference, and even just this little post I had Chris cut for me. It was perfect for a little bit of a hose rack there, and now it's not just laying on the ground, all nice and neat and tidy again. And the garden. There we go. It looks good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we've got going so far. A few things we've learned along the way. One of the biggest things is when I talked about amending, and we amended originally with wood shavings and sand. It's a good start. Eli was actually cleaning out the duck house just right down the hill there, and he's like, oh, you know, I gotta put in the compost, and I'm like, wait a minute, let me look this up. So turns out duck is actually not a hot manure, which means you can put it straight on the garden. That has actually solved a bunch of our problems. Seems to be an amazing amendment for our particular soil and what we're lacking. Everywhere I have put on, worked in the duck shavings that come out of the duck house, because it's wood shavings that have sat for about a week. They're nice and saturated. They work great. All of the plants grow better. So this has now become my main source of nutrients to start off in a garden bed. We're still kind of playing around with what's missing. We do probably have some missing nutrients that we're having to amend with. We're using some fertilizer for now. I'm trying to lean more towards a natural sort of sustainable answer, but for right now we're using that. I'm using leaf mulch instead of the shavings. We cut down a bunch of trees. We have the leaves. They're free. They actually repel water a little bit better. We've had some crazy rainstorms, and they've actually managed to get the water to run off a little bit better than the shavings, which is important because we're having nutrient runoff as well as like nutrient leaching, as well as just soggy soil. Leaf mulch seems to be working really well. And again, it's free. We're really happy with free things. What else? Yeah, so we've got beans and potatoes that are growing really well. Those seem to be succeeding. A lot of the rest is either I have put some seeds in, or I have seeds started in the greenhouse that I'll be transplanting out. The chayote is growing. Again, that looks like it may be deficient in something, and we're playing around with figuring out what that is. But it's growing, and it's doing better than it had before. So baby steps. It's always baby steps. We're learning as we go. Big problem was the bug pressure. I mean, it doesn't matter how healthy the plant is. If a big grasshopper comes along, a 3-inch grasshopper, and just chops the stem off, it doesn't matter how healthy the plant was. You're done. So this has solved that problem, pretty much full stop. The birds, mostly the chickens, roam around. They mostly stay out of the beds for now. We'll see if that becomes a problem. A good spray of water tends to resolve that issue. And they keep the bug population down. We have very few grasshoppers over here. We see very few around the house anymore. So clearly that has been a good solution for that particular problem. And I'm actually kind of moving that solution up to the upper garden. And hopefully that will work up there as well. It's a larger space and it was not designed to fence each individual bed, so I'm having to get really creative. I'm actually putting together another video about what I'm doing up there because it's a little bit different than here, but it will be just a little bit of an extra update on how we're trying really hard to grow our own food here. So thanks for watching, for seeing this transformation. I'm pretty proud of this little space. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit, and I think it's really important that we see this as baby steps. I know there's a lot of homesteaders out there putting out content where they suddenly have a giant greenhouse or these beautiful raised beds or something. That's wonderful. But sometimes you're in the place of working with what you have, not having money, and having to get really creative. So hopefully this was a little interesting, entertaining, inspirational. So subscribe if you would like to see more, like the video, comment. If you have some ideas of other things I could do, I would love to hear it. So we'll see you next time.